a pillowy soft dough, a crispy golden crust with an open interior, and an aggressive amount of olive oil. Let's make focaccia. Focaccia is a great bread that everyone should know how to make. It's simple pantry ingredients that are better mixed by hand. It's hard to mess up because it's cooked in a large pan, so you don't need to worry about shaping it. It can be made with countless different toppings, or my favorite way to enjoy it is with a thick sandwich. Let's get cooking. A couple of notes on this focaccia. I like using a fairly high hydration dough. For this recipe, my water amount is 75% of the flour. This leads to a focaccia with a thin but really crisp crust and a soft interior with fairly large holes inside. This texture and size I find perfect for making sandwiches with. While the end product I prefer much more, a high hydration dough will naturally be pretty sticky and can be annoying to work with if you aren't used to it, but don't worry, I'll show you how to deal with all of those. Start by heating 335 grams of water to 100 to 115 degrees in the microwave. Now add in 9 grams of yeast, and this is the ideal temperature for instant yeast to activate. Additionally, we're going to add in a spoonful of flour and just mix that until it's combined. What we are doing here is proofing the yeast, or simply put, testing if the yeast is alive. After 5 to 10 minutes, a foamy surface should rise to the top. If the surface is not foamy, the yeast is likely dead and should be discarded, but as you can see here, we've got some nice little activation. Meanwhile, add 450 grams of flour to a large mixing bowl. All-purpose or bread flour work equally fine. Add in 9 grams of salt and pour in the proofed yeast. Now you're going to begin working the dough with your hands until no dry flour remains and a shaggy dough has formed. It's going to be very sticky, but we're going to pour in some oil to help that. Pour in 9 grams of olive oil into the dough and continue working it until the oil is completely absorbed. Like I mentioned earlier, this dough is a high hydration dough, but because of this, the dough ferments easier and it can build gluten without any kneading, and I'll show you guys how to do that. But first, let's let it rest for 20 minutes and wash your hands in the meantime. Once rested, we are going to do what is called a stretch and fold. I like the method from Maurizio Leo from The Perfect Loaf. First, dip your hands in some water to prevent sticking, then all you do is pull one corner of the dough as high as you can go without tearing, then fold it over to the other side. Rotate the bowl, stretch the dough, and fold it over. Now rotate again, stretch and fold over, rotate again, stretch and fold over, for a total of 4 stretch and folds in a set. What stretching and folding does is increase the strength of the dough by developing the gluten network through flour hydration. In total, we are going to perform 4 sets of stretch and folds with 30 minutes of rest in between. By the end of the 4th set, you will notice that the dough has turned from slightly shaggy to completely smooth and elastic with some nice air bubbles. After the 4th stretch and fold, it is time to get this in the pan and start adding some more olive oil. Drizzle a bunch of olive oil into the bottom of a 9 by 13 inch baking pan. And if this looks like a lot of oil, it is. Turn the dough out into the oil pan and flip it over so it gets on both sides. Now I like using a 9 by 13 inch pan so the dough can rise up the edges and gives a slightly thicker bread compared to many recipes that you will see in a shallower baking sheet. But I'll let you decide which one you want to do. Gently work the dough into the edges of the pan, and if the dough is springing back from the edges a lot, you can just cover this and let it rest for about 10 to 15 minutes and then try gently working it to the edges again. Once worked to the corners, we're going to let the dough proof for 45 to 60 minutes until it is well risen and puffy with air bubbles. Once proofed, now it is time for one of my top 5 cooking simple pleasures, putting dimples into the focaccia dough. Lightly wet your fingers and gently push to the bottom of the pan, but don't go through the dough. I like a bunch of dimples in mine, so I go over 2 times, mainly just because it feels good. Now it's time to top it. Add 20 grams of oil and 20 grams of water to a bowl, and you're going to mix this until an emulsion forms. Pour this mixture over top of the dough where it will pool into the dimples. For herbs, I'm going to add a bunch of rosemary sprigs, which are probably the most classic, but you can really use whatever you like. I also like to add a nice big sprinkle of flaky salt all over the top. And I would like to point out that this really turns into a great pizza too. If you just want to throw some sauce, cheese, or meats on the top, be my guest. Now it's time to bake. We're going to place the focaccia in the middle rack of a 450-degree oven and bake for around 25 minutes until the dough is deeply golden brown and crispy on bottom. You're going to turn the dough out on the wire rack. The top should be golden and the bottom should be slightly deeper brown and crispy all over. Once you slice in, you can see we have that nice airy and open crumb from the high hydration dough with a perfectly thin, crisp crust. You can serve the focaccia as is or with more olive oil, but my absolute favorite way to enjoy focaccia is as a sandwich after having them in Florence that way a number of years ago. There will be a video on that coming very, very soon. All right, ladies and gents, full recipe will be up on my website in the description below if you guys want to make this. But like I said, this is probably one of the best, easiest bread recipes out there that I feel like everyone should know how to make. It's super simple. You don't need to worry about like shaping it or anything. You just throw it in a pan, let it rise, do your stretch and folds, let that yeast go to work, and then you'll come up with something very delicious, and of course, lots and lots of olive oil. But that's gonna wrap it up for this one. Hopefully you all enjoyed. If you did, definitely drop me a like and subscribe, but I'll catch you in the next one.